Hey guys, old man things here. I'm in the fisherman's nook. It's an old Rembrandt. I don't know if you ever heard of Rembrandt. I've never heard. It's called Rembrandt Select Briar, and it's I think what they call the Prince shape. I don't know. And I've got some of that. If you ever watched all my videos, I have a video where I flavored some tobacco with blackberry brandy. So I've got some of that in here. So I thought I'd smoke it while I tell you a story. This is the first Monday night story, and maybe it'll be my last. If you haven't already gotten your pipe, grab a pipe if you don't mind. Sometimes it's more fun to smoke with someone else. Put my fan on. So, I just thought I'd. This is another one of those stories, just to give you something to think about now. I'll just tell it how I was told it. Told it a couple times. And you guys can decide what you want. But what I'm telling you is 100% honesty, what I was told. No exaggeration. And to be honest, I don't know what I would even believe myself. When I was in high school, we had this old lady that was a librarian. And one time, and I've always been a Dickens fan, one time I checked out Great Expectations, and her eyes like lit up, and she said, any Dickens fan is a fan of mine, she said. And from that point on, she always liked me, and she was the old librarian, and she would say stuff like, "Oh, fiddlesticks," or "Oh, fudge." She always wore a dress and with the lace around her, neck and stuff. She was just an old, nice lady. And when the tobacco dries out my mouth like I'm eating a bloody what's that? Gooseberry or something. Boy. My tea's too hot. One day I didn't really like, especially my senior year, I had so many, I could have graduated, I just needed one more class the first semester and as senior. So I just had goof off classes. And I had a lot of study hours. And the study hours were getting stricter and stricter yet. They were in like the cafeteria, so you could go into the library, and I could go into the library, and like I said, the librarian liked me, so I would just talk to her. I always liked older people to talk to. And I was talking to her one day, and she said, "Mike, I want to tell you something." And she said, "I don't tell many people this." So I said, "All right." Guess I don't need a light, a match. Drinking John Wayne, out of John Wayne. she said when I was a girl, she said she was in the grocery store with her mom. And she said it was just about the end of the war. And she said the feeling was throughout the country was that, I mean, they were close to Berlin by this time. It was in April 1945. So she said, you know, she said the overall feeling there was the weight was being removed about what was going on in Europe. And anyway, so she said she was in the grocery store with her mom, and they had a radio going in the grocery store. It was just a little grocery store. And she said it was the country's station, so they're playing old country stuff. And she said all of a sudden it was like a breaking news went over the radio, and it said Roosevelt is dead, that he took his own life. And she said she remembers looking at her mom, and she said, what does that mean, he took his own life? And the mom said that he killed himself. And when she got up to the checkout, the woman was the checkout, you know, the woman was who was working, I think, to check them out. She said, I knew Roosevelt was ill, but she said, I didn't know he was that ill that he would have killed himself. And she said she remembers her mom saying something, and then all of a sudden the music stopped again, and it was another breaking news, and the announcer said, we got it wrong. Roosevelt died of a stroke. So she didn't know what to think, and she said she remembers saying to her mom, what does that mean? And the mom said, well, you know, the announcer got it wrong. But she said she always believed, and she said to that day, she said she believed that they felt like because it was during the war, they couldn't, it would have been bad morale, and especially like what the enemy would have thought, that the leader of our country killed himself. So they had to they quickly fixed it and said he had a stroke. So I was told that when I was a senior, so I was 18. When I was about 21, I was at this like flea market like thing, and this guy was selling furs. And I was in college, and I was learning bagpipes. And I said, and he had all kinds of different furs. And I was thinking it would be neat to have like a little sporran, a fur sporran, and make one myself. So I said to the guy, I said, he was an older guy, big old beard. I said, just out of curiosity, I said, do you have any bear skin? And he went, oh, bear skin. He said, a lot of people don't like seeing bear skin, but he said, yeah, I got some bear skin. So or bear fur. So he went in his van, and he came out with this bunch of different things of bear, but he wanted way too much for it. And I said, why don't people like it? He said, well, there's so many conspiracies about it. And where I was the heart of Native American area in Wisconsin. And he said, especially the Native Americans around here, they get upset if they see that you're selling it. So I told him what I wanted it for, like to do the sporran, and we started talking. And he said to me, you know, it's rare that a young guy like you would have anything to even want to spend time talking to me. He said, most kids your age don't have any time of day for older guys like me. And I said, I respect the, you know, your generation. And I said, hey, out of curiosity, I always did that. I always, even to this day. I said, were you in the war? And he said, yeah, as a matter of fact, he said, I was in the war. And I said, well, my grandpa was in the U.S. Army Air Corps in the 8th Army. And I said, and my other grandpa was in the Royal Navy, and he was in the Pacific. And he goes, let me tell you something. He said, I don't tell this to very many people. He said, I was in the Army, and he said, I was in a group that we were coming through Italy into through the North Africa and Italy into Europe. And he said, by this time, he said, we knew that Berlin was pretty much going to get captured. And he said, we kind of were letting Russia come in. It was out of some sort of agreement that that Russia take over Berlin. So he said, we just kind of sat back. So he said, they loaded a bunch of us onto a plane, and we were going to the Pacific to fight to fight and eventually Japan. So he said, we were all on the plane, and all of a sudden the captain came on the speaker, and he said, I have to tell you, I just got word that Roosevelt killed himself. Self-inflicted wound by a gun. And he said, you could have heard a pin drop. He said, no one said anything. And he said that was, that plane was just filled. It was one of those cargo planes, I believe he said. And he said, no one said anything. He said, it's just it was like this weight that was put on top of him. And he said, a couple minutes later, the captain came back on the air, and he said, I got it wrong. He said he didn't kill himself. He suffered a stroke and died of a stroke. He said, well, they all turned to each other and said, that's a bunch of BS. How do you make that sort of mistake? So that's two different people, two completely apart, didn't know anything about what the other one had ever said to me. So now I got two different people saying that he killed himself. Now this time, he shot himself, basically. So my first job I got after I got out of college, I worked at a Gannett newspaper as a graphic designer. And I worked with a lady. She was an older lady. And one day, we always got along. All of us designers got along. It was so much fun. And I just loved my job. But anyways, I've always been lucky, I should say. I've always loved my job wherever I worked. But anyhow, one day she was saying to me, she said, and she had been divorced, but she said, I always liked my father-in-law. And she said, I never told you about my father-in-law, did I? And I said, no, what was with him? And she said, well, he was an older, he was in the Navy, and he was an older guy. And she said, he was like first mate, or he was some high officer in the Navy, and he was Roosevelt's personal yacht. He worked as a personal yacht. Worked on Roosevelt's personal yacht. Anyhow, she said Roosevelt really liked him. He was an older guy, and he was too old to be fighting in the war, but he was still in service. And he was kind of a chunky guy, and Roosevelt had him come to work with him. And now I know his last name is Tilke. And I don't know what his first name was. His son was Gordon. That's who this Laura divorced. Anyways, he used to take Roosevelt out for walks in the White House, and he would wheel him. And he said, one day he noticed, because he's from northern Wisconsin, and he noticed that Roosevelt he always had a blanket over his lap in the wheelchair. And he noticed one day that he saw a barrel sticking out of the one end of the blanket. And he said to Roosevelt, do you have a gun under your blanket? And Roosevelt said, don't tell anyone. And he said, no, I won't. And Roosevelt showed it to him. He said it was a 9mm. And he said, this Tilke said to Roosevelt, one day, because he started noticing a habit. He always had it with him. One day he said, just out of curiosity, he said, why do you have that with you? And he said, I'm in so much pain. And he said, I don't know if it helps me to know that at any time I can take myself away from this pain or what, but he said it's just kind of a comfort. And again, I never met the guy. This was through the ex-daughter-in-law. I don't know if it's true or not. She just told me that. But then putting that with the other two things I heard, just makes you wonder, makes you think. Did he commit suicide? Would they have covered it up for morale, for who knows what? So just something to give you guys to think about. Again, I don't know what to think, but a librarian, which I see no reason why she would make it up, and this old guy selling furs, I don't see any reason why he would make that up, and to be so correct and on to what exactly, almost like what the librarian said. So I actually told that Laura Tilke what I had heard from these other two people, and she said that doesn't surprise me at all, based on what her, I don't know what his name was. I remember him, Jack or something like that. Anyways, based on what her father-in-law used to tell them about his experience with Roosevelt. So, all right, just something to think about. And again, I'm just telling you what I was told, no exaggeration. And I honestly don't know what I say I would believe either. So, all right, thanks for watching, guys.